In the previous chapter or section of the tutorial, all the data was loaded and an experiment file saved. So now all the data exists within Eager Pro in the form of waves. Wave is just Eager Pro's way of calling an array. This tool called Data Browser is a sort of internal browser or explorer in Eager Pro. As you can see, it's showing the root folder here, and within that root folder there are a whole bunch of waves. They are one-dimensional waves that the loading commands prepared and loaded into Eager Pro. If you click on one particular wave, you can look up some statistics about the wave, number of points, average value, standard deviation, and so on and so forth. And you can actually see the graph of that wave as well. I'm not going to spend much time about it, but the only thing I want to point out that if we look at time axis, we can see that the minimum value is 0 for the time axis for the well A1. And then if we look another well, let's say B1, now the minimum value is 1.05. What that means is that the well B1 was imaged 1.05 minutes later than well A1. So it's just to make a point about that exercise of extracting the timestamps from the movies in order to make the graphs against the real elapsed time values instead of making the graphs against the number of frames. So now let's make some useful and meaningful graphs with the waves that we just loaded. There are two ways to make graphs in our tool. So the first one, as the name implies, makes a graph for an entire row of wells. Let's say if you enter A, then it's going to make a graph for all the wells from A1 through A12. So how to use this command is you need to enter the letter for that row, and then in the second field you're going to have to enter the name of the measurement. For example, partition coefficient. Click continue. Now we have this graph with 12 curves of partition coefficient over time for wells A1 through A12. Let's do another one. Let's say B, and then let's plot another measurement. If you do not remember the names of the measurements, you can click the help button and look up the names. So we have 6 measurements: puncture density by cells area, by cells intensity, partition coefficient, enrichment coefficient, puncture area, and cells area. You can actually select the name of the measurement here and copy by pressing Ctrl+C, just like in other applications in Windows. Then come here, paste it by pressing Ctrl+V, and plot. Now we have another graph with a whole bunch of curves. So as you can imagine, you can keep doing this for all of the rows and all of the measurements. If you look at this graph, you can see two distinctly different group of wells or group of curves. So that means these curves or wells need to be grouped separately. So for that we have another way to plot the measurements. So in this second command or second function, you have to enter the wells, the names separated by semicolon. Let's say I want to do B10, B11, and B12, so you can just type them here. And then the names of the measurements are selected from this drop-down menu. So let's do puncta density by cells area. Now I have 3 curves for wells B10, 11, and 12. And I can do a plot of the same measurement for the rest of the wells in row B. So I can type B1, B2, and so on and so forth, or I can make use of this list of imaged wells that was prepared, and I can highlight and select the well names that I need. Control C for copy again, and then I ran the command and paste the names here. Now I have the graph for the remaining 9 curves for the row B. And we did this because we saw 2 different group of wells or curves. So this second option, let me enter the same group of wells again. In this drop-down menu, in addition to selecting each of the 6 measurements, there are 2 additional options which are called essential measurements and all measurements. All measurements, as the name implies, plots all 6 measurements over time for all of the selected wells. And the essential measurements are the top 3, the puncta density by cells area, partition coefficient, and puncta density by cells intensity. So let's do the essentials. So now we have 3 graphs made at the same time automatically. And let's select another group of cells from here. Again, you just cut, Control C, paste. Now I'm going to do all measurements. And the help file here, just a reminder that you can cut and paste the names of the wells either from this list of imaged wells table, or it could be actually stored in a text file outside Eager Pro. In reality, you probably have the key to the wells of the plate, however you plated and treated the wells. So it's just a reminder here. And let's say for these 3 wells, we're going to do all measurements again. Now you have 6 graphs for those selected wells. Some of these measurements are used only temporarily. They kind of auxiliary or evaluation type of graphs. For example, this graph of sales area over time is not very useful to display or to make measurements on. So, but it could be good graph to look at to kind of evaluate and figure out what happened with the experiment. For example, if you see very dramatic drop in the area that are covered by the cells, that could mean that there was a lot of cell death during the experiment. So you can kind of make an evaluation of those kind of things by plotting all measurements. Here we see some fluctuations, but it's not dramatic drop. because if you pay attention to the scale, to the absolute values of the on the y-axis, you can see that the numbers are pretty large, and the axis is scaled between minimum and maximum value of the waves or the curves. Now if you double click on the numbers of the axis, you can open this axis modification window, and here you can choose to plot in different range. You can type in 0 for the starting value, and now you can see that the intensities are not changing dramatically. So once you do those kind of evaluations, then you can actually close this window or graph, because you may not need it. And for closing, you just press the close button in the right upper corner, and then you confirm, close it with no save. Let's say this graph we also do not need for long term. We looked at it, we got the information we needed. Now we need to close. Again, if I close it, it will ask for confirmation. You can imagine that if you do this for multiple windows, then confirming each time may be at least annoying. So there is a way to close the windows without the confirmation. And for that you need to hold Alt button and close it. Then the window is closed without confirmation. However, the better approach is actually to make a lot of graphs but then hide them. And the reason I'm mentioning these options, because as you can see, this work area can get pretty busy very quickly with so many graphs. So instead of closing, you can choose to hide the graphs, and you can do it for individual graphs here. And to do that, you have to press the Shift button and press the close button here. So then now that graph is hidden, it's not closed all the way. Again, I can click around and close as many windows I want. Or there is actually a better tool to deal with multiple windows or multiple graphs at once using this window browser tool. The reason I'm advising to use hiding the graphs instead of closing, because every time you need the graph, you need to make them from scratch if the graph was closed without any saving. But if you just hide it, it will be hidden from the work area without cluttering the area, but they will be available in the way they were made at all times. So I'm going to open the window browser. Now this window, this tool shows all of the graphs that exist within the experiment file. It shows not only the graphs, but it shows some tables or other type of windows that may be made and open. So from here you can select the wells and hide them. You can see some of the wells that are already hidden, that we hid them earlier. And you can Control A, for example, just the Windows command works here, selects all of them. So now everything is hidden. And then you can display them one at a time as you need to work on individual graphs. So if I select one, click Show, it shows that graph. I can select more than one by selecting the windows while holding the control button. So if I hold control and select on graphs, I can select them as I want, and if I display, they are displayed.